Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into immigration today, a topic that's constantly in the news, especially now with a new administration. There's definitely a lot of questions and concerns swirling around, particularly when it comes to what's happening at the border.
Absolutely. And with so much information flying around, it's important to break it down and, really understand what's going on.
Exactly, and that's what we're here for, right? So to help us navigate this, we've got three sources: an article from Spectrum News, a report from Nonprofit Quarterly, and a piece from LA Techo.
Sounds like a good mix of perspectives.
I think so too. All right, let's jump right in. The first thing that caught my eye was this article from Spectrum News. It talks about a Mexican nonprofit that's getting ready for a potential surge in migrants. Like they're expecting a massive wave of people to head their way.
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty telling, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it suggests that there's a growing sense of urgency, maybe even desperation for people to leave their home countries and, try to seek a new life elsewhere.
Right. It's like they're sensing a shift in the air, like something's coming. What do you think is driving this anticipated influx?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but it could be a combination of factors. Maybe there are rumors about changes to immigration policy or increased enforcement, and that's creating this kind of preemptive move by people who are thinking about making the journey.
So, like a better to go now than later kind of situation.
Exactly. But on top of that, we have to consider the broader context, the ongoing issues that are pushing people to leave in the first place, like poverty, violence, political instability, even things like climate change. These are powerful motivators, and they're forcing people to make incredibly difficult choices.
It's a reminder that this isn't just about politics. It's about real people's lives and their hopes for a better future. But, speaking of politics, the nonprofit quarterly article dives into the legal landscape, and honestly, it's pretty unsettling. They quote Paramita Shah, the co-founder of Just Futures Law, who predicts that Trump is aiming for the largest mass deportation in U.S. history. I think those are some pretty serious claims.
Yeah, and Shaw's not someone who throws around those kinds of statements lightly.
Yeah.
She's deeply involved in this work and has a really good understanding of the legal system. If her prediction is even remotely accurate, we're talking about a level of displacement unlike anything we've seen in recent times.
It's hard to even fathom the potential impact on families and communities. And, the article also touches on something that I found really troubling: the shrinking number of safe havens, churches, schools, hospitals, places we traditionally thought of as off limits might not be protected anymore.
It really undermines any sense of security or trust, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Imagine living with that constant fear of being targeted, even in places that should be sanctuaries.
Absolutely. It creates this atmosphere of anxiety and uncertainty that must be incredibly difficult to live with. So the article also mentions Biden's immigration policies, which I found interesting. Shah points out that he's actually scaled back asylum and overseen a high number of deportations himself. I have to admit that surprised me.
It's a reminder that immigration isn't always a black and white issue.
Yeah.
Both administrations have pursued policies that have resulted in deportations, and both have faced criticism from different sides of the political spectrum.
It's like this constant push and pull, a struggle to find some kind of balance.
Hmm.
But in the midst of all this uncertainty, there's also this sense of resilience. And the nonprofit quarterly article offers some practical advice that I think is really valuable. For example, they have a whole section on digital security, which seems increasingly important these days.
Oh, absolutely. In this digital age, we leave a trail of data everywhere we go. And, that data can be accessed by anyone, from tech companies to law enforcement to immigration authorities. It's crucial to take steps to protect yourself, especially if you're in a vulnerable situation.
Right. It's not about being paranoid. It's about being smart and taking precautions. And one of the things they specifically recommend is using encrypted messaging apps like Signal. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah, Signal's great. It's end-to-end encrypted, and it's run by a nonprofit organization. So, they have less incentive to sell or share user data. It's definitely a more secure option for sensitive conversations.
That makes sense. It's not just about the encryption. It's about who's controlling the data and what their motives are. Okay, but even beyond messaging apps, they have this whole section on what they call emergency preparedness. It lays out a plan from the Immigrant Defense Project, and honestly, it's pretty intense stuff. It's like preparing for the worst case scenario.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. But it's also about taking control in a situation where you might feel powerless. Having a plan can give you a sense of agency and peace of mind, even in the face of uncertainty.
So what kind of things does this plan involve?
Well, one of the first things they recommend is organizing your personal documents. Things like your passport, visa, immigration, and criminal history documents, applications submitted to immigration, anything with your A number. Oh, and speaking of A numbers.
Wait, what's an A number?
Oh, it's a unique identifier assigned to anyone who's involved in immigration proceedings with the U.S. government. It's basically your case file number, and it's super important to keep track of.
Gotcha. So basically having all your ducks in a row just in case.
Exactly. And they also emphasize seeking legal counsel as soon as possible. The Immigrant Defense Project actually offers a free legal helpline, and you can reach them by email, too. They can help you understand your rights and explore what options might be available.
Okay, that's good to know. And if you do hire a lawyer, they stress the importance of having a signed contract in a language you understand. Both you and the attorney should sign it, and you should keep a copy. It's all about protecting yourself and making sure everything is transparent.
Absolutely. And it's not just about legal preparedness. The article also talks about planning for medical needs, making sure you have essential information readily available.
Like, what kind of information?
Things like allergies, medications, emergency contacts. You can carry a card with all that information or have someone you trust who can access your medical records.
That's smart. You never know when something might happen and you need that information quickly.
Right. And for parents, there's another layer of planning, childcare.
Yeah.
What happens if you're detained or separated from your kids?
That's a terrifying thought.
It is, and that's why they recommend designating someone who can take care of your children if something were to happen. This person should have all the necessary information, school contacts, medical conditions, emergency documents, the whole 9 yards. It's about making sure your kids are safe and cared for no matter what.
It's incredible how much goes into preparing for these worst-case scenarios. It must be so emotionally draining.
It is, but it's also about taking back some control in a situation that can feel very much out of control. And the last thing they mention is planning for your financial needs.
Oh, yeah. What happens to your bills in your bank account if you're detained?
Right? Well, they recommend talking to an attorney about potentially giving someone you trust power of attorney over your finances. That way they can access your accounts, pay your bills, manage your paycheck, handle any debts, even help with things like posting bond.
So it's like having someone you can rely on to handle your affairs if you're unable to.
Exactly. It's all about having that support system in place. And remember, even though the situation can feel daunting, you're not alone. There are resources available and people dedicated to helping. The article highlights the Immigration Advocates Network, which compiles information about free and low-cost legal services across the country.
It's amazing to see organizations like that stepping up to provide support during such difficult times. It gives me a little glimmer of hope amidst all the uncertainty.
For sure. There are people out there who care and who are fighting for a more just and welcoming world. But speaking of people on the front lines, our third source, the LA Taco article, actually highlights 7 different nonprofits that are actively supporting and defending immigrants' rights. It's really inspiring to see the variety of work they're doing.
All right, I'm ready to hear about these organizations. Tell me everything.
Well, one that stands out is El Otro Lado. They're based in San Isidro, California, and work on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. They provide legal and humanitarian assistance to refugees and migrants, and they're not afraid to challenge the system. In fact, they filed a class action lawsuit against U.S. Customs and Border Protection for turning away asylum seekers.
Wow, that's bold. They're really putting themselves out there to fight for people's rights. What about the other organizations?
Well, there's CELO, a women-led organization that focuses specifically on helping indigenous communities in Los Angeles. They offer language access, cultural preservation, emergency assistance, and they advocate against gender-based violence.
That's fantastic. They're addressing the needs of a community that's often overlooked in these larger conversations.
Exactly. And then there's Xialeo, which has been around since 1986, advocating for immigrant rights, organizing marches, providing legal support, and promoting cultural education to foster acceptance. They're really on the front lines of this fight.
It's incredible to see organizations with such a long history of activism. What about the others?
Well, there's United We Dream, a youth-led network that empowers immigrant youth to advocate for their rights, stop deportations, and push for immigration reform. They've organized nationwide actions and are known for their energy and passion.
It's so inspiring to see young people getting involved and making their voices heard. They're the future, after all.
Absolutely. And then we have the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, which takes a slightly different approach. They focus on advancing immigrant rights by training legal professionals, advocating for policy changes, providing legal resources, and helping people find consultations. They're working to strengthen the system from the inside.
That's so important. They're equipping other advocates with the tools and knowledge they need to make a difference.
For sure. Then there's No Us Without You, a group founded by restaurant veterans in LA at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm.
They saw undocumented hospitality workers who were already vulnerable being hit especially hard by the shutdown, so they started providing food assistance. They're a great example of community-led support.
That's heartwarming to hear. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, people find ways to help each other.
And finally, we have the California Immigrant Policy Center. They unite grassroots organizations and activists to influence policies that support immigrants in California, focusing on things like social rights, economic justice, and access to health care. They're working at the state level to create lasting change.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. It's amazing to see so many different groups working to support immigrants in such a variety of ways. It gives me hope that even in the face of these challenges, there's a powerful network of support out there.
I agree. It's a testament to the resilience and determination of both immigrants and their allies to create a more just and welcoming society. But I think it also raises an important question for all of us, given everything we've learned today. What role do we see ourselves playing in this?
That's a great question, and I think we'll explore that further in the next part of our deep dive. It's crazy to think, as we dig into these sources, how immigration is so much more than just like policies and numbers. It's about real people with lives and dreams and hopes for the future.
It is. It's easy to get caught up in the abstract,
Yeah.
but these are human stories we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that really hits home when you read that Spectrum News article,
Hmm.
the one that doesn't even name the Mexican nonprofit, prepping for the migrant surge.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they're preparing speaks volumes.
Yeah, like it's an unspoken signal that something big is about to happen. So what do you think is behind this anticipated wave of migration?
Well, it's probably a bunch of things working together. I mean, word could have gotten out about potential changes to U.S. immigration policies, creating this like rush to get in before the door slams shut.
So it's like preemptive almost.
Yeah, exactly. But we also can't forget about the reasons people are fleeing in the first place, right? The poverty, the violence, political instability, even things like climate change are pushing people to make these incredibly difficult choices.
Right. It's a reminder that for many, this isn't a choice made lightly. It's about survival. And that brings us back to the nonprofit quarterly article and that pretty scary prediction from Paramita Shah about mass deportations.
It's a really heavy thought. The potential human cost is huge. We're talking about families ripped apart, communities disrupted, people uprooted from their lives. It's not just numbers on a page.
And the article really highlights how this fear seeps into every corner of life. They talk about the shrinking safe havens, churches, schools, hospitals. Even those places might not be off limits for ICE raids anymore.
It's a constant state of anxiety. Imagine never feeling truly safe, always wondering if today's the day you're targeted. It's got to be exhausting.
It's heartbreaking. And honestly, it makes me wonder how people even cope with that level of stress and uncertainty.
It takes incredible strength, but it also highlights why those practical tips from the nonprofit quarterly article are so important. Even small things like digital security can make a difference.
Yeah, using Signal for secure messaging, for example. But that whole section on emergency preparedness, it's intense. It feels like a survival guide.
In a way, it is. It's about taking control in a situation where you might feel totally powerless, like organizing your important documents, making copies, and having a plan for who takes care of your kids and finances if something happens.
It's a lot to process, but I can see how being prepared could provide some peace of mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And knowing your rights, having legal support, that's huge. They really push contacting the Immigrant Defense Project or the Immigration Advocates Network for free or low-cost legal help.
Those resources are so vital, especially when things feel overwhelming. And speaking of people on the front lines, let's talk about those 7 nonprofits from the LA Techo article. They're really out there doing amazing work.
Each organization has its own approach.
Mhm.
We talked about El Otro Lado at the border, but there's so many others.
Like CILO, right? With their work with indigenous communities in Los Angeles, providing language access, fighting gender-based violence, it's incredible.
Exactly. Filling those crucial gaps. Then there's CRELE. They've been fighting for immigrant rights for almost 40 years. They're like the veterans of this movement.
A real powerhouse. And united, we dream with all those young people. It's inspiring to see that next generation stepping up.
That energy is infectious,
Yeah.
makes you hopeful for the future, and the Immigrant Legal Resource Center working within the system to change it. Training lawyers, advocating for policy changes. It's a long game, but so important.
Building those foundations for lasting change. And know us, without you stepping up during the pandemic to feed undocumented hospitality workers. I mean, talk about community support.
It's a beautiful thing. And finally, the California Immigrant Policy Center, working at the state level to influence policies that benefit immigrants, pushing for social rights, economic justice, access to health care regardless of status.
It's amazing to see all these groups working on so many different levels, from individual cases to big policy changes.
It shows the power of collective action and the belief in a better future.
Hmm.
But it also makes you think, what's our role in all of this? It's not just about lawyers and activists.
Exactly. It's about everyday people speaking up, getting involved, demanding change. And I think that's the perfect place to pick up in the last part of our deep dive. Don't you think?
I'm ready when you are.
So we've covered a lot of ground, right? Like all that anxiety about potential immigration policy changes the real human impact of mass deportations, those practical steps people can take to stay safe.
Yeah.
We've seen all the amazing work being done by different organizations, but where do we go from here? What does this all mean for like the average person listening to this?
It's the big question, right? It's easy to get overwhelmed, like, what can one person really do to change something this big?
Yeah.
But I think that's where we get stuck.
Right, because it feels too big to tackle.
Yeah. But change doesn't come from the top down. It starts with individuals, like speaking up, getting educated,
Yeah.
taking action in their own communities.
So what does that look like? Like in real life, what can people actually do?
Well, I mean, first off, we can support those organizations that are already on the ground doing the hard work.
Hmm.
Volunteer, donate, amplify their message on social media.
Right. We talked about groups like Allo, Trolato, Shirla United, We Dream, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, No, Without You, and the California Immigrant Policy Center. They all need our support to keep going.
Exactly. And it's not just about money. We can also use our voices to push for better, more humane immigration policies. Contact our elected officials, sign petitions, go to rallies, speak up when we see injustice.
Using whatever platform we have to make a difference. And I think learning more about the issue is huge too, going beyond the sound bites and really understanding the complexities of human stories behind the statistics.
Absolutely. And that's what I appreciate about the sources we looked at today. They give us a more nuanced perspective, a glimpse into the lives of people directly affected by these policies.
It challenges us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and really engage with this issue on a deeper level. And at the end of the day, I think it comes down to empathy.
Yeah, recognizing that shared humanity that connects us all, no matter where we come from or what our legal status is.
Seeing ourselves in the stories of others, realizing that their struggles are our struggles and their fight for dignity and justice is a fight we should all be a part of. This deep dive has been intense, but also really inspiring. It's shown us the resilience of communities, the commitment of advocates, and this belief that a better future is possible.
And as we go forward, let's hold on to those stories, the faces, the voices, the hopes of those who are most affected by this issue.
Let's use what we've learned, our compassion and our voices, to build a world where everyone feels safe, welcome, and valued.
It's a vision worth fighting for.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you'll keep exploring this issue with us and stay engaged in the conversation about immigration in the U.S.
It's been great talking with you.
Thanks.